Captains of Industry, brought to you by Airtel.
A nuclear physicist, a businessman, a trained strategist. These are some of the terms that can be used to describe BrianDames. He was brought in to turn around one of the most troubled state-owned enterprises in South Africa. His work, many would say, is just pretty much cut out for him. Since coming into office in July of 2010, he's now managed to turn Eskom back to profitability, but nonetheless, it's still a long road to Africa's energy security. Leading the way is BrianDames, the CEO of Eskom Holdings, our captain of industry tonight. BrianDames, thanks again for your time. Talk to us about your experience coming into Eskom in the last year. It must have been a daunting task because of the very public squabbles between management and the board.
I think we've had, thank you Lorata for the opportunity, we've had quite good work done by the board and our current chairman, which we all agreed we would focus on healing the organisation and moving the organisation forward. We've successfully done that. And I'm very pleased with the work that we've done over the last few months. It's not finished, not at all. You're right, there's still a long way ahead for Eskom, for its people. But not many South Africans know that Eskom is one of the world's largest power companies. And in 2001 has been the world's best power company. My full intent is to restore it back to a place where all South Africans can be proud about it.
Let's talk about that relationship between the management and the board. Certainly it seems that you and the current chairman have a very good working relationship, but there were still some broader sort of governance issues and guidelines to be established as to your being left alone to do the day-to-day management of Eskom, but still being able to get the shareholders' perspective at each critical moment, I think, of the organization's path. What sort of concessions have you guys come to, agreements you've come to as to how Eskom ought to be run?
I think there's always been a very strong governance framework for Eskom. You would also know that our corporate council, together with our previous chairman, has written books around corporate governance. And Eskom, to a great extent, has been a pioneer as to what happens. And that should be seen as the norm, and what has happened as the exception. So getting back to the norm has not been that difficult for us. You're very right in the chairman and I having a good relationship is very important, but also to understand exactly where the roles start and where they end. And to that effect, we've actually gone some way in working between the executive and the board and defining exactly the role of the chairman and the role of the chief exec, and make sure that between the management and the board that we agree to a clear charter of conduct between us to just re-establish that process. Together with that, we've obviously done quite a lot of work in having very open discussions about it. I tend to be very honest, I tend to be very transparent with my team and similarly with the board, so that we're quite clear in terms of what's expected of us as management and what is expected of the board.
And what about government as a shareholder? Because I think that's also been the very tricky issue, is unprecedented levels of interference by the previous minister. I don't necessarily need you to talk about the new minister, but just basically managing that relationship when a government is a shareholder.
You know, the energy issues in South Africa has been going through many type of policy changes. You know, there was a policy change that Eskom would not build further capacity, hence the situation that we have today. I must say to you that under the administration over the last 2 years, we have seen a significant focus on the energy issues and understanding amongst government around the energy issues. Government created the Interministerial Committee. They dealt with all the aspects of energy. You've seen the support Eskom received around funding for the company and moving that forward. So we've had nothing but support from our shareholder as far as that is concerned. The new growth path is a very exciting way in terms of policy that addresses the key issues in the country around poverty and job creation. And we have a role to play. You know, we touch the lives of all 49 million South Africans every day. Eskom is one of the largest companies in this country, and we have a role to play in not making sure that not only South Africa has got energy security, but also the rest of Africa and Southern Africa.
Recently it was reported that you've announced some sort of a partnership with the Special Investigating Unit. Now, is this a preemptive strike against potential fraud and corruption at Eskom, or do you suspect that there's still very murky undertones in the way in which how some divisions of Eskom are run?
We've always been very proud about the way we go about doing business in Eskom, and we should be very clear on that. Let me take you one step back we have over the last 7 months as a management team engaged intensely about where we want to take the company. Being inside of Eskom, I needed to take an approach of how would you deal with this organization as if you would come from outside. And one of the strategies that I've opted is to literally turn Eskom upside down and look at every aspect of its business. Out of that strategy, we have been quite clear as to the type of company we want to create. We did not come up with a vision statement. We've come up with very clear descriptives of the type of organization we want to create. And one element of that is that we want to be a trusted company. We're the largest fundraiser in terms of international bonds in this country, outside of government. And therefore, investors need to trust us in terms of our engagement. We need to be ethical and well-governed. And out of that came this work around us making sure we root out corruption if it exists, wherever it may exist. And hence the relationship with this Special Investigation Unit.
Eskom is without a doubt the most strategic of the state-owned enterprises. So tell us, where do we stand in terms of South Africa's energy security?
South Africa, over the next 7 years, certainly has got a very, what we call, tight supply-demand balance. We've detailed it over 7 years. Why 7 years? Because by the end of that period, we would have seen the commissioning of the current power stations that we construct. And we've said, particularly over the next 2 to 5 years, we're going to have a constraint. Why? Because the country keeps on growing, which is great, and the pace at which we add capacity is a lot lower than the growth. And that's what we've detailed. So our view is that as a country, we can make sure we have energy security. As Eskom alone, we can't do it on our own. We really need a partnership with all 49 million South Africans. And hence the campaign we've launched recently, called 49M, launched by the Deputy President, championing energy efficiency in South Africa. You'll see I wear yellow shoelaces, all part of the campaign. And we really want to build a social movement in South Africa around energy efficiency.
So what is that? Like, I must turn off my geyser when I go
away? It is about, if you don't use it, you put it off. You switch it off. It's not just about the geyser. It's about being conscious and aware about the use of energy. It's not just about energy security, about keeping the lights on or helping Eskom. It's about the environment. It's about saving your pocket. Energy prices will migrate towards cost-reflective tariffs. And therefore, it's very important, as all of us as South Africans, you know, we're woefully inefficient as a country. If you look at our GDP output over the amount of energy we use, compared to other countries, you'll find that we're between 30 and 40% inefficient.
Let's elaborate on that a little bit. Some people are saying, you know, we're in a good standing just by way of capacity and supply at the moment because the economy is not growing fast enough. And if we were to meet the demands set out in the new growth path that you referred to, South Africa to grow 6–7% in order to create meaningful jobs and change, Eskom won't be in a position to support that industrial process.
You're very right in terms of this analysis. You know, the country for the first time has got a long-term energy plan that focuses on 20 years. The assumptions in that plan is that electricity would grow at 3% per annum every year. The new growth path calls for 7% growth. So really there's a challenge in it for the country as to how it keep a pace with that type of growth. Currently, for the first quarter of this year, we've expected a 2% electricity growth. We've only seen 1.5%. Electricity growth. However, the country needs to also focus on its use of energy. We have seen amongst our customers increase in production and reduction in energy use. And that's where the energy efficiency investments come from the economy. And so the economy need to take a perspective around how do you make sure you grow at faster rates and be a lot more efficient.
Eskom as a business, not just as a state-owned enterprise, you've returned Eskom to a profit of about 9.5 billion in part of 2010. Certainly that's what was reflected in your interim results. Now that's coming from a period of severe losses 2 years prior to that. And a lot of people looking at Eskom have questioned financial management and efficient use of resources at Eskom. Tell us how you turn things around for Eskom.
Firstly, I would not claim it's me alone. I've got a management team, they're great, and there's a whole bunch of 40,000 Eskomouts that's worked quite hard at this. But it was very important for us to focus particularly on our cost structures and make sure that we're prudent around our expenditure. I think there's a perception around Eskom, and then there's fact and reality. I think globally Eskom is still the lowest cost producer of electricity. Amongst our generation fleet, I can assure you there's only one that is not in the top quartile of power plants globally. That doesn't mean that there aren't inefficiencies, and I can promise you we have put in place quite a clear process to focus on efficiency. On the other hand, we've seen electricity prices move towards cost-reflective tariffs. Previously, we used to produce this product lower than what we're selling it at. Doesn't make business sense. And now at least we're getting to a point where we're making some margin and can pay back our debt. But this year, we, for instance, put an incentive scheme for all our staff that said before anybody, including myself, earn any incentive in this company, keep the lights on and save at least 2 billion rand out of operating expenditure without touching the maintenance costs. And that has created some focus in the company.
Because that's what Eskom's doing internally, but we're feeling the pinch as consumers. And yes, obviously people are making us aware that we've had subsidized electricity for the longest time and it can't be commercially viable going forward. But we're now dealing with the threats of inflation creeping through, and a lot of that inflation is predicated on rising electricity tariffs. And you've already made an application to extend these tariffs by another 2 years. So the consumer's really going to feel the pinch. Isn't there another way? I mean, you've launched one of the most successful dollar-denominated bonds. You've got investors who are interested in Eskom. Shouldn't you capitalize on that and just give us some respite?
Absolutely right. A lot of interest from investors, and the greatest amount of the interest is our ability to pay them back. And that's important. But we need to go back to the fundamentals around electricity tariffs. Firstly, we don't use the tariffs to fund our capital expansion programs. We are using the debt markets, and we have received equity support from the government. And the guarantees is for us to tap the debt markets. And really the electricity tariffs is there for us to recover our costs, to earn some return in order to reinvest in the company and to pay back the debt. I can say to you, even the 9.7 billion interim profit that we've announced is insufficient for us to pay back our interest on our debt. So we need to get to a point as a company to earn some return in order to pay back our debt and reinvest into the future. What you don't know is that when the prices were announced at 25% tariff increases for the next 3 years, that we've also implemented an inclining block tariff rate to protect low-income households, so that the low-income households will not see a 25% increase. Actually, in the first year, they see a decrease. In the second year, they see a 5% increase. And the higher users, so the more you use, the higher you pay. You most probably will pay more than 25%. And therefore, the incentive around greater energy efficiency. But it's very important that the South African electricity prices needs to reflect the economic cost of providing it. And that's a reality.
So we must just, reality bites. We must just
No, I think as consumers we need to be very conscious about where we can make investments in order for us to save electricity. We've been very wasteful as a country.
We'll continue speaking on this tack with BrianDames, the CEO of Eskom, appointed in July of 2010. We'll hear more from him concerning the environmental footprint that Eskom is starting to embark on, and we'll find out more about the man. He plays golf and he likes to go camping. Stay with us.